So today we need to be discussing about to introduce you to the concept of sampling. I think sampling is key when you're conducting our studies. So we need to briefly discuss the concepts of sampling, because when you're now doing your research, it won't be possible to study everyone, but you have to really select a population among your study participants who you then study. For that whole process of selecting a segment or part of the population to study is called the sampling. So maybe just to give a reason why do we do sampling is because we cannot really study the whole population. So because we cannot really study the whole population, we always have to sample or take a small proportion of our study participants, so that from them we can then conduct our research. Then from the findings from our research we can infer the findings. So what is sampling? As I said, sampling is the process of getting a sample, but what we then get is called a sample. So there are several definitions of a sample. A sample is a portion of the population which you are studying. It can be a segment of the population which you are studying. It can be a subset of the population which you are studying. Then this statement of saying it can be it's a representative. It might not be correct. So I'll be using our example of returnees in quarantine centers, That's what I'll be using for this lesson. We've been using it since we started, so I'll continue to use it. So the returnees in quarantine centers, in our case, that's our population. That's our population, or our study participants. What we'll be studying. So remember, using this definition now to say what is sample? A sample is a portion of the population. In this case, what is our population? Our population, which we have been using for this series of lectures, are the returnees in quarantine centers. They're also our study participants. So it's a portion of those. Remember, as I said, in research, we want to get reasons why people in quarantine centers are getting infected. We will not be able to study all of them, but we can look for a portion of those, a segment of those, or a subset which we can study. I removed the word representative of a sample. Why? Because usually now, when you are collecting your sample, your sample should be structured in a way that it is representative. It is representing the population. So if you have errors in the way in which you take your sample will bias. It no longer really be representative of a sample. So it is important when you are sampling to make sure whatever sample you take is representative of your study population. Then there's one. So yes, I think it's here in the next slide. So what is our sampling? For us to do sampling, there's one important aspect which is very important. First, remember, if you start from, we have our study participants. These are the people which we have our study participants which you want to study. or our population, which you want to watch, which you want to start. Then from this population, we will not be able to study all the, and we will not be able to study the population or all the study participants. Maybe the study participants, let me remove the word study participants, maybe use the population. I think that's what makes sense. If I use study population, I might confuse you. So we've got the population which we want to study. In this case, our population are returnees and coming back from Zimbabwe. But we cannot study the whole population of those people. We need to get what you call a sampling frame. And a sampling frame now is a list of potential elements or members from which the sample is going to be derived. So in this case, I am dealing with quarantine centers. And so my quarantine centers are my sampling frame. But I may not be able to take all the quarantine centers for my sample. So I might choose maybe one quarantine center pitching, one center, one quarantine center per province. And then out of all the 10 provinces which we have in Zimbabwe. So this one becomes my sampling frame. Remember, you've got more than, if you check our population of the quarantine centers, we used to have more than 60 quarantine centers in the country. So out of those 60 quarantine, they constitute the whole population of people in quarantine centers. But as part of research, we won't be able to really study all the population of the people in quarantine centers of the 60. We can actually have a few now. A few of those quarantine centers where we are going to be getting our study participants. That is called in the sampling frame. Remember that everyone now in the sampling frame has an equal chance of being selected. So just to repeat again, it is the list of potential elements of members from which the sample is going to be derived. As I said in the previous slide, a sample should be representative. Should be representative. Why? It should be free from bias. That is, it adequately reflects the characteristics in the chosen population. So we should choose our sample in a manner that it represents. It will represent the features of the population. So if you don't do it properly, you end up having a biased sample. Why do we need to make sure? Why do we need to make sure when you are sampling, we need to make sure the sample is representative? It is because of two important issues, which I'm going to illustrate here. Which I'm going to illustrate. Let me put two things here. Let me put another circle so that I illustrate what I want to show. So this is our population. Let's assume this is our population which we have. So this is our population. This is our population. Then from our population, what is going to happen? We are going to take so let's assume this is our population which we are studying. From our population, what are we going to do? We are going to take a sample. We are going to take a sample from this bigger population. This is like our big population. Then from this bigger population, what do? We are going to take a sample. We are going to take to take a sample. Then two things happens when you take a sample from this population. So I'm looking for arrows so that I illustrate to you what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say, which is very important. Which is very important, because if you don't understand that, then there will be problems. There are going to be problems if you don't understand that. If you don't understand that, then there's going to be problems. So what happens? We have our population, and then in the population, what do? We take a sample from the population. Then what then happens now? Which is very sorry. I always want to do my things so that we do the things together. So that we do the things together and you understand where I'm coming from. So exactly this one. So there are two things. So first, as part of our study, we have our population. These are our population which we want to study. We want to study the regions which are coming from, you know, from countries where we have got COVID-19. So we take a small part of this, which is our sample. Then this is the sample which we are going to study to really to understand what are the factors which are contributing to returnees getting HIV, what's infection, getting COVID-19 infection while they are in quarantine centers. From this small sample, we are going to get the result to say maybe people are getting infected because they're overcrowded, because, you know, so many other things which we have discussed. We are then supposed to, what we found there, we can then use it to infer to the whole population. And with what we found in this small population, we can then refer these results to say to the whole population, because we cannot start with this whole population. But what we get from as the results, we can then by inference, we say, you know, what can I say? What we found in that small population also applies to the rest of the rest of the population. And so that's the whole idea. Whatever you have your population, you get a small subset of that population, which you then study. Then from the results which you get, you then assume what you found there is the same thing which is happening within the whole population. Why I drew this diagram? I drew this diagram because if you select your sample and it is not representative of the population, you cannot then infer your results to say whatever you get in this small sample, that's the same thing which is happening within the population. So that's why it is very important to make sure your sample is representative. Because if your sample is not representative, you cannot then really infer your results, which I'm showing in this diagram. Why do you do sampling? As I said, it's cheaper. Why is it cheaper? Because we cannot really study the whole population. So we can select a few people which you can study. It's less time consuming and it's not very, it's easy to manage. It's avoid the distraction of the population. Imagine you are doing a research, maybe by doing this research, you are giving the study participants, maybe you are giving them something which is toxic. So if you study the whole population, what happens? You are going to destroy the whole population. And because of that, I'm not saying but if you check for most of the studies which are done in humans, let's take, for example, currently people are doing, they are preparing the vaccine for corona vaccine and for coronavirus. How this whole process started, it didn't start by really starting by giving the vaccine to humans. No, there are stages which happens and between these things. First, it is tested in animals, in rats and mice. Then it is tested in a few people, maybe 50 or so. Then, you know, increase the number until, because if you just rush to test something within a bigger population, you can distract the whole population. Remember, you've got two types of population. you have got population which are infinite and which are infinite. Infinite, it means there's no end. So for those population, actually, you can, in some scenarios, you can study the whole population if the population is small. But in some cases, let's take, for example, trees or sand, whatever, and within you want to study. So those like ants, associate all those things. Those are examples of infinite population. So you can't really study everything. So because of that, we have to sample. Then yes, sampling is cheap, is less time consuming, it's easy to manage, it avoids destruction of the population, it is good for practically impossible scenarios like infinite population, but it also has limitation. You always have sampling error. So this sampling error comes here now, at where I was explaining. But usually your sample in most cases won't be really representative of your population. So because of that, you can have that sampling error, which then makes it difficult for you to infer your results to the population. Then you always have an aspect of doubt and uncertainty. You can't be sure. You can't be really be sure to say the sample which we've used is enough to be able to to answer whatever questions which you are asking. So in some cases, as I said, you can study the whole population if possible. Like in this case, our population are people in quarantine centers. We can study all of them here. So if you study the population, the whole population, at times it's possible, whatever for what you'll be studying. So in that case, it eliminates doubts. So you actually get because you're studying everyone. So by the fact that we are studying everyone, you eliminate doubts, which means your inference. Remember, if you go back to this slide, there's no longer inference now. Simple. You're taking a small you're taking a small part of this. But if you're studying everything there, it means all these issues which we discussed here of sampling error, doubt, and what will be removed. Why? Because in this case, you have studied everyone. So if you study everyone, it means whatever you get is going to apply to the what is the actual sample. So yes, that's what it does. It eliminates doubts, it eliminates uncertainty, and it eliminates uncertainty. Then the main disadvantage actually is just usually the costs. It's very costly now to really, it's costly, it's time consuming, to really study everyone. Yeah, so it's mainly about the feasibility. It's not usually feasible now for you to be able to study everyone. But at times you can study. It depends with the size of the population. It doesn't always, when people hear the word population, it doesn't mean the population is big. People tend to confuse the population. Most of the population we know is like the population of a country. So we know like we are like 12 million, in Zimbabwe, which is a big. But some population are small. You can have a population of all your study participants, maybe it's less than 100 or less than 50. So in such a case, what is important is how you define your population. And if your population is defined correctly, it will be, you can actually, it depends now how is defined. Some well-defined population, they can only have a few people. So we are going to go to the sampling technique now. How do you sample? You have decided that for this study, you can't study the whole population, but you want to take a sample. We have two types of sample, which we call the sampling technique. We have got one, what we call probability sampling. Probability sampling is the selection of our study participants is based on chance. By chance, we mean everyone, every member of the population is an equal chance of being selected. Everyone has an equal chance of being what? Of being selected. Then we call that probability what? Probability sampling. Which everyone has an equal chance of being selected. So it's based on chance, which means if you want to select, you have got you have created your sampling frame. You now want to sample. So every member of your sampling frame will have an equal chance of being selected. We call that type probability sampling, or you can hear in other ways, in other books, in others, where we call this one, it's random sampling. Everyone has an equal chance of what? Of being collected. Then the other type of sampling which we have is non-probability sampling. Non-probability sampling is also called non-random, and it's non-random. In non-random, everyone has no equal chance of being what? Of being selected. For example, we know in our population of returnees who are coming from Zimbabwe, who are in quarantine centers, we might have those from South Africa, those from Botswana, we have got males, we have got females. The moment we say we want to select from South Africa, it means we already have a predetermined selection criteria. So because of that, every member now does not have an equal chance of what? Of being what? Of being selected. So non-probability sampling is also called non-random gene sampling. So we've got two types of sampling techniques: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Probability sampling selection is based on chance, which means every member of the population has an equal chance of being what? Of being selected. The non-probability sampling, we have some criteria which we are going to use to select our study participants. So we are going to discuss for probability sampling, and we have probability sampling or random sampling. Another word, we have got 4 types of sampling techniques which can be used. The first one is simple random what? Simple random sampling. By simple random sampling, what do you mean? As I said, usually it means everyone has an equal chance of being selected. These are just examples of simple random things which are used. Things like lotto, things like dice, things like raffle tickets. And I hope you know the dice, which is 6, which is, I think it has 4 sides. If you throw it away, the chance that it will land at one of those things is equal, because you can pick any of the number depending on the side which is going to land. So these are like simple random sampling. It just means everyone within your sampling frame has an equal chance of being selected. So let's take, for example, our example which we gave. We say our example, we are going to get 1G, we are going to get 1 quarantine center per province, which means what will happen if you want to do simple random sampling, we will have 10, and we take all the people in quarantine who have been quarantine centers in every province, which means we put. Remember, it's not like we are putting them, but what we can do, we can write all the names. We can write all the names, not all the names, but we can, yes, maybe first we can write all the names of people in each of the 10 quarantine centers. So that anyway, 1G, we write all the names in each, we write all the names in each of the 10 quarantine centers. Let me use PQC as the quarantine centers. That's the first step. Then what do you do? Maybe Tawaisa in these quarantine centers, maybe you realize Tawaisa, let's assume we are going to have 1,000. We are going to have 1,000. That's the total. That's the total number which you're going to get. Remember, our first stage was we are going to get one quarantine center per province. In every quarantine entity, then we take all the names of one quarantine center, we list them down. We realize that we have a total of 1,000 people. We have 1,000 people in all the quarantine quarantine centers. One of the things which I forgot to mention before we understand our sampling is usually before you start your sampling technique. One of the important thing which is important is sample size. Good for your study. How many participants do you want? I will not go in detail in terms of how do you calculate sample size, because calculation of sample size, because this one is beyond your scope in terms of how do you calculate sample size. But from the previous lectures, let's assume in this study we want 100 people. We want 100 participants. That's our sample size. We've decided already. In this study, the number of people we want 100 for our study. So that's the first thing I'd keep that stage. When you have decided whatever you want to decide in terms of sampling size, the next thing you need to understand is your sample size. How many participants usually you want? So if you are doing simple random sampling, remember we said out of the 10 participants, what do? We want to get out of the 10 quarantine centers, we assume we have a total of 1,000 participants. And in these ones, we need a sample size of 100, which we have discussed. So from the 1,000, you need to have 100 participants for your study. How do you get this 100 from the 1,000? Using simple random sampling. If you're using simple random sampling, as I said, the first thing you need to get out, what is the total number of people in your sampling frame? In this case, there are 1,000. What you can do, if you're using the lotto or the raffle ticket method, if you're using the lotto or the raffle ticket method, for you to get 100 people, how do you do it? You can actually write one of the easy way which you guys understand is you can use have a hit. Let's say in a hit and it in that hit you have 1,000 pieces of paper. Pieces of what? Pieces of paper. Then from there, in that 1,000 pieces of paper, what do? You first shake, shake, and in your head. Then you pick what's after shaking. You pick hundreds. You pick 100 pieces. Those 100 pieces are only going to pick higher. Then that would be your sample size. So remember, by simple random sampling, it means everyone has an equal chance of being selected. You just write your papers, essay at 100, you put them at 1,000. But you can then check, I think you know how to use a head, when people want to pick things randomly. So you're picking the 100 times. So the 100 things which you pick, you can also, that then becomes your sample. The other option which you can use if you're doing random sampling, you can use some software or some computer. You can use some software or some computer where you select, you list your numbers, all the 1,000. on a software or whatever in a computer, then the computer can select 100, 100 things randomly. So I think that's simple random sampling. People, they confuse simple random sampling. Remember, the main concept is everyone has an equal chance of being selected. So for everyone to have an equal chance of being selected, it means what? To have an equal chance of being selected, it means for everyone to have an equal chance of being selected, it means they are, and you like what I do, you use the H system where you can do this. And so that's the first one, simple random sampling. Most people, they think, let's say you're doing a study in HIV, maybe you want to get participants from a clinic. If you go, outside the clinic and you say, you, can you please come for my study? And then maybe you want 50 participants, you just point this and this. That's not random sampling. If you want to do a random sampling at a clinic, it means you first really identify everyone at the clinic, and then you put them, maybe you list them, or you give them numbers, or you create cards, whatever, and with each whatever, the number, whoever is there, you can put them in a hat. Then you pick the number of participants which you want to pick. The moment you just say you and you come, it's no longer simple random sampling. Maybe you look at someone, you're interested by their smile, the way they're looking, you just point them or whatever. So because of that, whatever criteria, if you just point people without doing it blindly, it no longer becomes simple random sampling. It will be what we'll discuss it later. Even if you go to a clinic and you say, I'm doing my study, I'm looking for people who wants to do this study, it's no longer simple random sampling. The moment you start saying, who wants to be part of my study, people are going to volunteer. Others will refuse, others will accept. Then because of that, it's no longer simple random sampling. Why? Because people are volunteering. Others who might refuse, there are reasons why they refuse. Those who accept, their reasons why they're accepting. You end up getting a sample which is biased. And this biased sample, you cannot then infer your results to your population. Remember the concept which we discussed from the start of what? Of representative sample. So you want your sample to do what? To be representative. The next type of sampling, of random sampling, is, I said there were 4 types. The first one is simple random sampling, or the lottery method, or the hat method, where you put everyone in the method. Then the second type of method which you can use is called systematic random sampling. So we use our example again. We want 1,000, but we have got 1,000. That's our population. Our population is what? Is 1,000. Our population is what? Is 1,000. Then we want to get, our sample is what? Is 100. How do we get 100 people from 1,000 if you are using systematic? There's a formula. Systematic, it means we are getting our samples very systematic. So what we do to do this, first we divide 1,000 by what? By 100. Then we get what? We get 10. And this 10 which we get, we call it the sampling what? So it is sampling interval. That's the sampling interval which we get if you divide 1,000 by 10. What then does this mean? It means we'll then go into our list of 1,000 people. Well, maybe their number 1, 2, 3, whatever, 4, 1, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, whatever, 8, 10, 20, blah 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 blah. maybe 500 up to 1,000. I did it. That's our number. What we do when you say we are Trugita systematic random sampling. When you are doing systematic random sampling, it means we then list first. We calculate our sampling. We calculate our sampling interval. Then next, what do? We list all our participants and in a line up to 1,000. Then we pick. Remember, we want 100 from 1,000. So 10 is our sampling interval. We pick which 10 better. So we've picked the first one and then what do? We pick which the next is, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. We pick which 10 is the first one. Then what do again? We count 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. We pick 20. Which after 10, I think which 20. Then we are picking after every 10. Because if you divide 1,000 by 100, if you divide 1,000 by 100, 10 is our sampling interval. So it means we pick which 10. Then if you pick which 10, we'll get our sample, which is of what? 1,000. But usually the first one at no picker, the first one at no picker, we should pick the first person at random also. How do we pick the first person at random? We can use our sampling heptanga, which we discussed here. We write 10 papers for the first 10, then for those first 10 we just pick one at random. Maybe it's number 7, whatever, or number 1 or number 2 at a pick. Then from number 2 at a pick using random, we then say we count 1, 2, 3 up to 10 to try 12. To count after up to 10, 22, 32, 42, and taking going. That's what. So that's the systematic where we pick the first one at random, then we divide our population which we have by our sample size to get the sampling interval. So the sampling interval, it then guides us with and it's in the sequence. How do we get our people? We first put our people in order, we put our study participants in some order. So that order, it helps us to to pick our study participants correctly. Then the next type of which we use is called stratified random sampling. That's the next type of sampling which you can use. Sorry, I need to remove this one here. And that's the third type which we want to discuss about. So the fourth one is cluster. Then the third one is stratified random sampling. By stratified random sampling, what do you mean? By stratified random sampling, it means first we stratify our study participants and into strata. So in this case, we have got 1,000 returnees. Our population is 1,000, and it remains 1,000. But we want to get a sample of 100. Maybe we can decide now to say, for our population of 100, we can decide to say, for our population of 100, we want to get 100. We want to get 100. We can say out of these 100, let's have 50 females and 50 males. That's already stratification. Or we can say we want to stratify by age. Out of the hundreds, we can say we want to have 50 adults and 50 what? And 50 children. So we have already stratified by what? By age. So stratification, it means we put, remember, one of the, if you go back to our previous examples of simple random sampling or systematic random sampling, if you do this, and if you pick 100 people randomly and papers from a hat, we might pick all females. Remember, it's by chance. So the same way with this one, if you choose the 10th, everyone after every 10, the 10th person might be a female out of all the 100. Remember, because it's random. So to avoid that now, to make sure that our sample is representative, in most cases, we can do what we call stratification, where we have some predefined criteria to say we want 50 females, we want 50 males, we want 50 adults, and we want 50 children, so that our sample is what is representative. So the way you select your 50 is the same. The way you select your 50 participants or your 50 males, you can select the 50 males. It means from 1,000, you put the females alone and the males alone. Then how you take your 50, you can use simple random sampling, where you use the H method, or you can use systematic random sampling. The same applies here. It means you need to first split your population into adults and children. Then the way you select your children from your adults or your children, you can either use simple random sampling or systematic sampling. So stratified, it means, remember, the whole aim is to make sure your sample size is representative. So by stratifying, you want to make sure you want to make sure your sample size is representative. Because if you use any of those, either stratified or what, you can actually take people of the same sex or of the same age. Why? The chance of doing that, why, is because you're doing your things at random. Then the last type of probability sampling is what we call cluster random sampling. Clusters, they are more of geographical, and it's more of like geographical. It's a bit complex than what I'm presenting, but by cluster is more of geographical. So remember, for example, in our example, we want to get people from 10 provinces. If you put these people from 10 provinces and we put them in line, there's a high chance that we might pick people who are from the same province. But to avoid that, we can say we have got 10 provinces. We have got 10 provinces. Out of the 10 provinces, our sample size is 100, which means per every province, we need 10 watts per province. And that's what we need, 10 per province. So you list your study participants by province, where you list how many returnees are coming from every province. Then in every province now, you can then pick 10 from every province. And the way you pick the 10, you can still use your systematic random sampling, or you use your simple random sampling, where you put everyone in a hat. So remember, you can use villages, you can use wards, you can use districts, you can use suburbs, and remember, we are all doing this. Why? Because you want to make sure your sample size is what is representative. So you can use all these things. 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 You can use all these th to try to, as your clusters which you are using. But in this case, we can, in our example, we can use provinces. So just to recap, in terms of our we said we've got two methods: probability, which is random, where every member has an equal chance of being selected, and we've got non-probability. For probability, we've got four. The first one is simple random method, which we've discussed, where you can use a head or you can use some software to select. The second one is systematic, where you divide your population with your sample, you get your sample interval, and you pick which 10, which 10, which 10, which 10, which 10, until you reach your 100. But the first one, you pick them using random. Then the next one, which we discussed, was stratified, and it was stratified sampling. And by stratified sampling, how do? You stratify according to a criteria. Either you classified according to sex, or you classified according to age, or faculty, whatever, maybe, or block. You are doing a research at an institute where they have got block 1, block 2, block 3, whatever. So you can take students from every block to make sure your sample size is. Then the next one is cluster, where you first put your things in clusters, villages, wards, districts, suburb, etc. Then you can then take your sample. Then the next type of sampling procedure, and the next type of sampling is non-probability. Non-probability, we also have, there are several, but here I only discuss four of them. The first one is what we call quota sampling. Quota sampling, I hope you've heard, in Parliament, where they talk of women's quota, youth quota, whatever. Which means before you start your sampling, you already have a predetermined proportion or allocation for certain attributes of a population. I want to start the returnees who are coming from South Africa, who are coming back into Zimbabwe. Then you say, out of those returnees, I want 20 from Botswana, I want 5 from Malawi, I want 5 from UK. And by creating that, by having that, that criteria before by setting that criteria before you get your population, that's quota sampling. And you already have some attributes you want. I want with long hair, I want black, I want women, all those things which you put before. Then you also have what you call convenient sampling. Convenient sampling, you are just doing things which are easy for you. And for example, I give you an example. If you go to a clinic and you say, you come and join the research, or you say those who want to participate in the research, can you raise your hands? Or maybe you're supposed to go throughout the whole district, but because of transport, because of other issues, you can't go far away. You only have resources to visit near places, and you just do those places. That's convenient sampling, and you are selecting your participants based on the proximity and people which are easy for you to get. So by that, it's convenience. So their proximity to you, or their, in terms of their accessibility. So by that, that's convenience. What's sampling? Another type which we have for non-probability sampling, we have what we call snowball sampling. What is snowball sampling? Snowball sampling, usually we use snowball sampling, where the first interview refers you to the next person to be interviewed. In most cases, most of my samples, my participants at no Shandisa snowball. There are things which are like hidden, and some things which are like hidden. For things which are hidden, we can use snowball. Let's say you want to study drug dealers, and being a drug dealer is is dangerous. and you can actually be it's a criminal offense. So which means these people, they tend to operate undercover, but for you to really know them, it means you have to first get the first drug dealer, so if you get the first drug dealer, they then refer you to another drug dealer. If you're also studying people who have sex with men, and maybe you're studying MSM, men who have sex with men, you're studying sex workers, you go to the first sex worker and they know each other, remember, or maybe you're studying thieves, so another thief knows another thief. So you get the first thief, they refer you to another thief. That's snowball sampling, where another participants refers you to another participants. For example, in our case, we have been, let's say, I think you've heard people escaping in quarantine centers. Maybe you first get one escaper and you study them. Escapees, those who escaped quarantine centers. So you know, to escape a quarantine center. But if you get one person, they can tell you another person who has also escaped. Then the other type of sampling is judgmental sampling. By this one, the researcher used their discretion to select elements of the sample. They know, and we have got the criteria to say, for my sample size, for my study participants, I want people who are tall, people who are short, people who do this, and maybe you're studying people with a specific disability, maybe you're studying people with whatever, without who have been had an accident and they lost both limbs. It means you know the people which you want to study. So your criteria is already predetermined. So you know exactly, for my people which I want to study, I am studying people like this. So you've got already some criteria which you are using. So that's what judgmental sampling. So in brief, I think these are just a recap again, so that we are still together. We have got two types of probability and non-probability. Probability, we have got 4: simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster random sampling. Then we go to our non-probability sampling now. These methods, we have got quarter sampling. We have convenience sampling. We have got quarter sampling, convenience sampling. We have got snowball sampling and judgmental sampling. Then one of the last thing is which sampling methods to use, and which sampling methods to use for your study. Generally, if you are doing a study which is quantitative, you are giving questionnaires, which is what's quantitative, you always need to make sure you use random sampling. That's recommended, because remember, if you don't use, most of the studies, quantitative studies which you do, it depends on the type of the study, but most of this, if you compare the two, random sampling and non-random sampling, we always really recommend you get your study participants in a random manner. Why? Because you want them to avoid bias. You want to make sure you can infer your results to the population. So it is important for